All right, hi everybody. So for my leadership interview presentation, I wanted to do something a little fun, a little pretty, and go into depth about the man I chose to interview. So to get started onto this presentation, I chose to interview a man known as Ray Rankin. So Ray, he is an owner of a painting business back in Brooklyn, New York, which I'm from New York City. And Ray is kind of like a household name where I live. He's kind of the go-to guy when you want to get some paint jobs or new flooring, siding, he pretty much does it all. So his company is based in Brooklyn, New York, and R&R is actually a family-owned business, and it's something that has been in service for over 60 years. So it kind of just went from father to son, father to son, father to son. Um, and in terms of how the business itself operates, it's something I would consider very old school. It is somewhat, he does all his jobs for cash only. They're completely off the books, so they don't have a social media presence, no Facebook, no Instagram. It's straight up, you have my phone number, you call me, you pay me in cash, and it's done. So that old school kind of way of life. But to go into him, he's obviously a painter. He's been painting for a very, very long time. And to go into painters in general, when we talk about their leadership styles, they are blue collar workers. So they're something that make them very physical and passionate about what they do, and that definitely reflects onto their leadership style. So, to get into the basis of Ray, kind of what he does, where he does it, and to just kind of go through all of that stuff. So, it is, like I said, a family-owned business, and it started with Ray's own father, actually, ironically, Ray Sr. The business actually spans three boroughs in New York City, that being Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island, and I put pictures of them up there so you guys kind of have an idea. If you just literally, it's like a puzzle, so if you put them all together, that's how close they are to each other for anybody unfamiliar with New York. But ironically, although it is based in the New York City metropolitan area, Ray's brother that he did mention to me actually lives in Jersey, so he operates the same R&R business just within the parts of Jersey that he lives in. So as far as who works with Ray, who he is technically the leader of, he works with obviously his employees, his fellow painters, he works with contractors, and obviously the most important, he works with clients. But pretty much through his business, through what he does, his main focus is he just kind of wants to be thorough with his paint jobs, be up to par for anybody wanting him across New York City. And while he wants to carry on that legacy of his father as the one guy who actually started the business all that time ago. So now when we get into his actual leadership, when I spoke to Ray, interviewed him, he was quite personable. He's kind of the guy who always had a fun joke, but also was very serious at the same time. But I could tell he was somebody who was very passionate about each answer that he was giving me. He's one of those, I would say, like old school Brooklyn guys who's very, he means everything from the heart. He wants you to do the best you can. But you can easily tell from, like I said, the passion that he exudes that everything he does is done with meaning. And when I asked him specifically about his leadership style, he and I quote said that he was a mean mother effer. So that's a New Yorker for you. But he kind of just made it known that owning a family business, like it made it a lot easier for him to take reins, to control everybody. But also it was a lot easier to call people out for him because you're the most, think about it in your own situation. Like it's easier for you to call out your sister than like your best friend, like at least in my opinion. Um, but yeah, overall, he was somebody who was very much about his business, very secure in his business and whatnot. And as far as how I kind of went back to our concepts we learned over this semester and related that back to his own decision making, he definitely is somebody who has an operational style of decision making. So he schedules a lot, he coordinates a lot, he makes a lot of his decisions based on the millions of moving parts that are happening behind the scenes. But overall, his leadership is something where he has a lot of young men who valiantly are going to look up to him and want to be like him. So it's pretty cool. And some concepts, that I wanted to related back to what we've learned and onto Ray's leadership style. I definitely saw that Ray exuded three types of leaderships. That was directive, relational, and democratic. As far as directive, he's a very direct type of guy. Like I said, as he explained himself, he was very much to the point, no BS whatsoever. But although he is directive, he still provides some sense of guidance and structure. And then to go in the relational aspect, he's built a lot of strong relationships with his employees and he gets to know them obviously just beyond work. And then democratic, he also exudes a lot of aspects of that because he will value his staff input and wants to include them in certain things, although he is still the sole owner of the company. And then to actually go into his coworkers and his brothers, who consist like all of his workers, his brothers, cousins, in-laws, they actually, in my opinion, define one of the styles of followers we kind of delved into, and that was the yes people. These are people that work for him that they're overtly or mainly positive and always on the leader side, and they just kind of see themselves as doers. Like whatever he wants us to do and he wants it done by set date, we will do it. Um, and then I did a little more of a deep dive into kind of what I expected of Ray when I met him versus the reality. So one of my main expectations was, all right, he's probably going to have a really strong emphasis on family because he owns a family business. He worked with his family, and that he would also have this sort of direct, authoritative type of leadership style because of his personality. And then when I learned in reality, both those things were true. He definitely emphasized family a lot to me, and as he described himself, it is quite easy to see, in fact, he is direct. How he described himself as a mean mother effer, he is a direct type of guy. Um, then I also want to talk about some surprises I had when I talked to Ray. So Ray actually, he never planned to become a sole owner of his business. He thought it would end with his father, but when his father kind of got older, him and his brothers agreed, let's do it. We can take it. We can do it. And he also said he did struggle to be a leader at first because when you work with like your brothers, he said, I didn't think my brothers would take me seriously or do any of that stuff with me, but they eventually did. But then the last thing was also he said some relationships with his workers did start out quite difficult for him to build. Specifically, he said with his son-in-laws, he has two son-in-laws, where he said, he didn't want to overstep because they still were his son-in-laws, but also he wanted them to get to work. Um, and to go into our next part about growth, I think one of the biggest strengths that Ray had was that he kind of had that directness. That directness meant that work was completed. He wasn't direct just to be funny. He was direct and assertive with his workers because he wanted that work that he was giving them directly to be completed. And he also was very flexible with workers, their personal needs, if they needed time off, he was very flexible with things like that. But I think two places where Ray could actually grow was that he could take rejection a lot easier. He was telling me like when he goes to jobs and people don't want him to do it and reject him at first, he does get a little, he reacts not the best to it, but he definitely says that rejection process is not his favorite and definitely something he could get better at. And then also acceptance for rest. This guy, I think he's almost 60. He works every single day. I think he just cannot ever imagine not working for this painting company, so I think rest is something he should definitely have. And then overall, to kind of cap this all off, what did I learn? What did I want to know about Ray? What did I learn? So I learned from him that you really can't build relationships under certain time frames. If you just meet somebody, you can't expect to be that comfortable with them in a specific set of time. Secondly, sometimes working with family is less stress-free than we think. Everybody tells you to not be employed by your family, not work with your family, but he said he loved it. He think it was easier for him. It was easier to boss him around than say somebody he never met. And then thirdly, we can encompass a variety of leadership styles. As I talked about the leadership styles with Ray, he kind of exuded several different types. He wasn't really hogung to just one. But yeah, and then lastly, I think blue collar workers are some of the best people and some of the best leaders to study and research because they know their business. They lead a tight group knit of people and they do it the best. And overall, it was something so cool to learn, somebody so cool to interview, and something so awesome to get to make a presentation about. So yeah,